You guys were supposed to take the test questions, outline them, come up with a thesis statement, get some evidence for them, right? Then I will release the test to you guys on Wednesday and have you take the test. Today in class, 7th period, spent the entire class period doing that, okay? So let's go over them. All right, who has question A in front of them? You guys have your questions up? Do I need to share my screen? Do I need to get the questions up for you?
I have.
All right, let's see here. If I could find my class. Where are you guys? Here you are. Okay. Okay, so real quick, before we move, I want to address the discussion this week also. Okay, so here's the discussion. I just posted it. This is like one of my favorite ones to do with students. Students always go a little bit nuts. This one's the troll the textbook assignment. So you're gonna read the part of the textbook. You're gonna read the part of the textbook and you are going to pretend like Hollywood has just made a movie on one part of that textbook, right? So you'll be like, section 2A is about this. And then you're gonna say, Hollywood made a movie about that. And you are an internet troll. And you are gonna be criticizing that movie and you're really angry about it, right? You're like one of these internet people who's angry about everything that they're trying to, rape your childhood with this movie. And so you're gonna like write an angry review about everything that the movie got wrong, right? And you say the movie said, Martin Luther King was a white guy, but he was really black or whatever, because you know more than they do. You're the smartest person in the internet. You know more than everyone, right? And you also don't have very good impulse control. So you're gonna write an angry trollish review about this fictional movie, okay? And then you need to also attack all of your classmates, like flame them for hating on their other movies, right? So Pooja's going to criticize her fake movie, and then Kira is going to defend Pooja's fake movie and defend it, right? And then Kira is going to attack her fake movie, and Ilha will defend Kira and Pooja's fake movies. You see what I'm saying, right? This is really fun. The students last year went nuts with this. It was something like 900 responses. It was so funny. And it was so funny. I was like crying with laughter last year when the students did it. So it's really good. We have a couple of ground rules here. This isn't the actual internet, okay? This is not YouTube comment section, so don't treat it like it is. You're not anonymous. You actually know each other. You're actually friends with each other, right? So don't put any like racist, sexist, like hateful crap on your posts, okay? Even though I'm 100% aware that it's all over the internet, it doesn't need to be here, okay? Are we cool? And don't actually like hurt people's feelings. Like they're your friends, they're not like anonymous people, right? So just remember that to be friendly. And as long as we're like friendly about this and we're all kind of joking and friendly, like it's a lot of fun. Cool? It's a good way to make the textbook kind of less boring. Cool? Are we all understanding each other? Awesome, possum. All right, let's go to the test. Let's go to the test. Yeah, baby. All right. Okay, Yash, you want to read question A for us?
To what extent did the judicial system of the United States lessen the impact of racial segregation in the decades before the 1950s?
Good. All right. So what is this question asking us? What does it mean by judicial system?
The courts.
Okay, courts. What else?
The law enforcement, like police.
Okay, so it'll be police, courts, and one other component. What happens after court?
Prison.
Prison. Okay, so judicial system is going to count those three things. We're looking for courts, police, courts, prisons. Okay, police, courts, and prisons. Am I talking about voting? I'm not talking about voting. Don't give me voting in here, right? Am I talking about like cultural stuff? No, don't give it to me. Okay. I'm talking about police, courts, and prisons. All right. And to what extent, what is that question asking? What does it require? In IB, if a question says to what extent, what does it require? Okay, you should probably write this down. To what extent requires a counter argument? Okay, counter argument is optional on a lot of these other ones, but this one is required. Right, and remember to what extent, if you remember, I think we did this with you, right? Picture the number 5, right? To what extent, you're always gonna say, this is never, and this is always. You're not gonna answer those, so you'll never say those. This one is, sometimes it's this and sometimes it's that. You're never gonna say that, right? So your answer will always be mostly true because of X, or not very true because of X, right? Your answer will always be one of those two. So you'll say something along the lines of, the judicial system did lessen segregation quite a bit because of A, B, and B. However, because of C, it didn't. Right? It's mostly true because of A and B, but because of C, C is the counter argument, right? Or you'll flip it and you'll say, the court system mostly expanded segregation because of A and B. However, one exception is C, where the court actually tried to restrict it. Does that make sense to you guys? Your thesis should be structured that way. All right, so give me, you should have 3 things. Follow the rule of 3. Follow the rule of 3 for your evidence, right? So the most basic thesis on any of these things is X is true because of A, B, and C, right? So A, B, and C, you follow the rule of 3. Within A, B, and C, again, follow the rule of 3. So for every point, you need to tell me, what is it, why is it important, and how is it connected? For every point, I need to have, what is it, why is it connected, or I'm sorry, what is it, why is it important, and how is it connected? Okay, that's the most basic way to write an essay. If you can master that really basic part, then you will basically just check the box on every essay you get, right? At that point, you can just add some style to it and, you know, make it more smooth. Okay, but the thing we really care about is that you get that skill down. Cool? Is that clear to you guys? All right, so give me an example of what I could expect to see in this question. Somebody chime in and give me an example of what that evidence could look like.
If you're saying, you're going, like again, that you're saying they like, you're saying that they increased racial segregation, like in the decades before 1950s, you could talk about the prison industrial complex. You could talk about like lynch law and how that worked within like the court, and like you could talk about like the black codes and like grandfather clauses to limit voting, and then your counter argument could be like Moore versus Dempsey, and saying that there is this that might have lessened that impact.
Okay, so that's pretty strong. So Pooja says the argument that the courts made segregation worse, right, is like the black codes and prison industrial complex, or the beginning of it, right? And what else did you say, Pooja? What was your other evidence?
I thought I said like the, how I don't even remember what I said. Hold on. Prison industrial complex, black codes and like grandfather clauses, and then like lynch law, like the
Oh yeah,
prisoners
lynch.
like, just taken out and then like
Yeah, okay, lynch law.
escaping.
lynch law, specifically the way that police are part of the lynch group, lynchings, right? Police and judges and stuff, right? Okay, that's good. Now, Pooja says grandfather clause. Do we think the grandfather clause should be in here? Is grandfather clause judicial? It's not judicial, right? So if you put it in there, I'm not going to mark you down, but it doesn't count anything, right? It's not answering the question. Okay. All right. Moore versus Dempsey seems like the most straightforward. Moore versus Dempsey seems like the most straightforward counter argument. Do you have an example of another counter argument, someone?
The freeing of Dick Rowland.
The free of who? Freeing of who?
Dick Rowland from the Tulsa
Okay.
massacres.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You could use him. You could use him as like an example of something that's true, right? Where you'd say it's not always terrible. You know, in this case, Dick Rowland was set free. Could be that, right? Do we have another counter argument? So the other counter argument could be geographic, right? Is lynch law, is all the truths about lynch law, is that going to be true everywhere in the country the same? No. So your counter argument would be that just because the judicial system is acting this way in Arkansas doesn't mean it's acting this way in Oregon, right? And then give some examples of how it's different. Okay? Do we feel okay about that one? All right, Kira, did you get your microphone working again? Still no mic? Kira will be mute for the rest of the day. Finally, oh my gosh, finally, what we've all been waiting for. Kira can't talk. Whew. Okay, all right. Okay, Ilha, why don't you read B for us?
Evaluate the role gender and the women's rights movement played in propagating racial tension throughout the South.
All right. Okay, so you'd say, what would a thesis look like on this? X is true because of A, B, and C. What do we think?
So gender played a role in propagating racial tension throughout the South because it perpetuated the fragile and pure stereotype for women, as well as perpetuating the aggressive nature of men.
Okay, I would say the stereotype of that, yes.
Yeah, stereotype of it, yeah.
Okay, that's good. By my count, that's 2 pieces of evidence though, right? We need an ABC. Is that right? By my count, I think you just gave me an AB. So what could we add to that? What are you missing?
Something about the women's rights movement?
Yeah. So women's rights movement is in the question and it says and.
And yeah.
Right? So you need to have both gender and the women's rights movement. Okay, so what else could we say about the women's rights movement?
Not sure.
Okay. Let's have someone chime in. Yash, what is the women's rights movement role in like race relations and segregation and stuff?
I guess we could talk about like Ida B. Wells, how she and Frederick Douglass were against each other because Frederick Douglass argued that Black men needed the vote first before women. So, yeah.
Was that Ida B. Wells or was that someone else?
That was.
It's not Wells. Who was it?
What was Anthony? Like Susan B. Anthony.
Yeah, it was Susan B. Anthony. It was Susan B. Anthony, but the rest of it was correct. Yash, you just got the names mixed up. So yeah, Susan B. Anthony was the leader of the women's rights movement, and she and Douglass had that falling out about the 15th Amendment, right? They had a falling out about the 15th Amendment. What happened to the women's rights after that moment? After that break, what happens to the women's rights movement? Kira, you can answer on chat room, right? Okay. So what, for not just for Kira on chat, but for everyone, what happens to the women's rights movement after because women's rights and black rights were tied together, right? All the way until the 15th Amendment, where we had that Douglas Anthony split. Okay. What happens over time? Black rights and women's rights. Are they going to come right back together again? No, they stay separate. In fact, they oftentimes move further and further away. By the time the women's, do you guys remember North Carolina, the Wilmington Massacre? Who was propagating the violence of the Wilmington Massacre?
Was it Rebecca Felton?
Yeah, and who was she?
She was a suffragette.
Mm-hmm. Not just a suffragette. She was like the leader of the North Carolina suffragette movement. She's not just a suffragette, right? What we find is that the women's rights movement, once the women's rights movement gets into the 19 teens and up until 1920, where the 19th Amendment happens, the women's rights movement is a white women's rights movement, right? Where it's almost completely racially segregated, the movement is. What does that do to black women? What's the effect of that?
They're not really considered as part of the women's rights movement.
Right.
So like they have to wait longer when it comes to getting like suffrage and things like that in the future.
Right. Right. It also, so it has an effect because once the women's rights movement becomes the white women's rights movement, the black rights movement has lost a big ally because all of those organizations, all those women leaders, all of those groups are gone. They're not part of the movement anymore. Right? So that's one problem. The other problem is it leaves black women really, really doubly screwed because black women are no longer being helped by the women's movement, and the black movement isn't being very helpful either, right? This is where that intersectionality kicks in, and black women are getting double screwed. Okay? Are we good on that? Okay. All right. Yeah, Kira, they're stuck with the black women in particular are stuck with the past women's roles. So things like, Kira, the housework and taking care of children and stuff, that really is second wave feminism. What we're talking about right now is first wave feminism. So first wave feminism is voting. It's the most basic thing is voting. Second wave feminism comes after World War II, and that's when we're dealing with things like childcare, workplace rights, birth control, abortion, ending sexual harassment, like admission into colleges, stuff like that. That's what we call second wave feminism. And so your answer is better for a second wave feminism answer, not a first wave feminism answer. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, Dhruv, read number C for us.
Compare racial justice in two regions of the United States, South, Northeast, Midwest, and West, in the 80 years between the Civil War and World War II.
Okay. All right, so your thesis for this should look something along the lines of Region A and Region B are very similar because of A and B, or Region 1 and Region 2 are similar because of A and B, but they're different because of C. Or you flip it. Regions 1 and 2 are the same because of A and B, and they're different because of C. Right? That's the most basic thesis I would expect here. That's how you want to formulate that. Do any of you guys have a thesis that you feel follows that formula pretty well? No? Ilha, what you got, man?
Um, say like racial justice in the South and the Midwest
Okay.
regions of the United States were similar because they both had like many sundown towns,
Okay.
and because um, mm,
And segregation.
yeah,
That's the
just
easy answer, is segregation in sundown towns, right? However, they're similar because, or however, they're different because,
because the South had harsher like uh, systemic racism.
sure, right? So they're different because of the intensity of violence and intensity of things, right? That's perfectly fine. What regions do you guys want to so the South is easy, right? The South, we have maximum violence, maximum segregation, we have maximum lynch law, we have the least accountability for white people, right? We also have the most blatantly racist laws in the South, you know, things like the black codes and crap like that. We also have no voting in the South, basically, right? Blacks are not allowed to vote at all. Okay. Describe the Northeast for me. What can we do with the Northeast? Uh-oh. You guys don't know what's going on in the Northeast? Okay, so it's actively progressive. Kira says it's actively progressive. That is true. That is true. Is the Northeast have anti-Black violence? Yes. Does the Northeast have anti-Black segregation? Yes. It does, but it doesn't have it everywhere. It's inconsistent, right? So Massachusetts will have segregation on the buses, but it won't have segregation in the classroom, right? So it's inconsistent. It's not on everything, okay? The Northeast has a lot of that kind of stuff. The Northeast has a lot less violence, of course, right? Where Alabama is lynching somebody every like 2 or 3 days, New York is lynching somebody every like month and a half, okay? The violence up north is also quite a bit different, right? We're not going to get lynchings in the north the same way we get lynchings in the south, right? Violence in the north, because the north has all the big giant cities where everyone's living in the city, violence in the north takes the form of like street crime, where you just shoot someone on the street and just leave their body on the street, right? That's where the violence is more like that. It's much less like mob of white people go hang someone. It's not, it's less like that. Okay. All right. What else? Who is the violence directed to in the north? Not just blacks, but who else? Yash, who else?
Would it be immigrants?
Bingo. Right? The north has massive immigration, and from this time period, it's immigrants coming from where? What part of the world? Oh, you guys are killing me. Where are they coming from? Europe, but where in Europe?
Like Ireland and Germany.
Okay, Ireland and Germany is before, so they're not getting very many German immigrants. So we're getting a lot of Poland, Russia, Greece, and the big one is Italy. Right? Okay, so the violence is anti-immigrant, where it's largely anti-Eastern European, anti-Catholic, anti-Jewish. Right? We also have Chinese up here too. Right? The Chinese who left the West was too hostile, so they moved to the East. Right? So the North spreads its racial tension out to a lot of different groups. Right? And the North also has this like clear idea that Italians are not white. right? Italians are this group that should be attacked as well, right? Jews are not white at this time. Russians are not white. Greeks are not white, right? There's that idea. Cool? All right, let's go out west. What do we got out west? What's it like out? What's the biggest difference out west? Who's being attacked out west? Oh, you guys are killing me. Mike, who's being attacked out west?
Chinese.
Yeah. A lot of Chinese, right? So California, for example, right? California, we have sundown towns that are black, we have sundown towns that are Chinese, and sundown towns that are Mexicans. Okay, so out west, the racial violence, racial prejudice is against Chinese, Native Americans, and Mexicans as much as it is against blacks. And the intensity of anti-black violence is much less. Is much less than it is in the South. Okay. Does the West have a lot of strict segregation? Not really. They have a little bit, but not really. And most of the segregation laws are Chinese or anti-Chinese segregation laws, right? So have like segregation laws as to like the white people work on this side of the mine and the Chinese workers work on the other side of the mine. And if they mix together, then you murder each other. You know, that's where the West is quite a bit different. Okay. All right. Let's Mike, you want to read D? Read D for us?
Yeah, compare the perspectives of Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois on the racism of America's past.
All right. So, all right. So, what do we do? What does Washington think about the past?
Forget it.
Yeah, Washington says largely forget it, right? Why? Why does he say that? You're correct. Why are you correct?
I think that if we get like stuck, I think it's like if we get stuck in like past wrong, we'll never be able to like move forward. We just have to focus on advancing ourselves and preparing for a future that we like can be equal rather than trying to right the past wrong.
Okay, that's pretty good. That's pretty good, right? Because Washington is prove yourself. Yeah, Kira says prove themselves to be equal. You prove yourself to be equal through education, through money, through business, right? You prove yourself to be equal. And if you're sitting there worried about the past, you can't do that. It gets in your way of your ability to do that. What does Du Bois think about the past? Ilha, what does Du Bois think about the past?
He thinks we should remember it as part of, or they should remember it as part of their history and try to incorporate that into their identity. That's where the two-faced identity comes in.
All right. Why? Why is that? So Du Bois says you should remember it, right? Why is Du Bois so intent on you remembering it, Dhruv? Do you remember?
He wants you to remember it so that you can learn from it.
Okay. There's something else to it, though. Yash, what else?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Kira, you want to type in your answer here? Mike, why else? Right, so Du Bois, so this is where we're going to get our revolutionary change versus incremental change, right? Du Bois says the past is the present. The past is the present. Just because I was a second-class citizen in the past, it means I'm a second-class citizen today. I can't just ignore it. I can't forget it because white people aren't going to ignore it or forget it. The only thing you do is burn the system down, right? Revolutionary change. You basically have to reset the whole thing. That the past is a trap for the present. Right? It's a cage the present can't get out of. right? Washington doesn't believe that. Washington believes that you can change a little bit at a time. This question is asking you for revolutionary versus incremental change, right? And the philosophic idea of revolutionary and incremental change comes from the idea that the past is your trap or not, right? How much does the past dictate who you are? All right. Okay, let's go with E. Yash, you want to read E for us, please?
To what extent do issues of white identity contribute to racial injustice in the nadir period of American history?
Okay. All right. What do we got? Okay. White identity contribute to racial injustice. What am I asking you about? There's a very, very important aspect of white identity that we've talked about. Think back to our discussion, the discussion online, the readings that you did, not this last week, but the week prior. Lost cause ideology, right? What is lost cause ideology, Mike?
Basically, they were taught that they were superior to blacks and slavery was good, and yeah.
Okay, so whites were taught that they were superior to the blacks. That isn't lost cause. Lost cause is more specific than that. What is lost cause?
The idea that the Confederacy's like reason for fighting the war is a valid reason. It's not when it's like invalid. It was a just cause.
Right. So lost cause is the idea that the South was justified in what they did, right? What is a person who believes in lost cause ideology? They're going to tell me that the South was fighting not for slavery, but for what?
States' rights.
States' rights, right? If you ever hear somebody say that the South fought for states' rights, that person is a racist. That is a racist idea, okay? It just isn't true. The state's right to do what? The state's right to what? Manage. Yeah, it's the state's right to own slaves, right? They're not arguing about the state's rights to regulate the teaching of science in second grade. They're not talking about the state's rights to put up blue street signs or green street signs. They're not talking about that, right? They're not talking about whether or not the state will get its snow removal budget from this pot or from that pot, right? It's not that. It's the state's right to own slaves. The entire thing was about that, right? Actual history tells us that the Civil War was fought over slavery and that the Southerners were traitors. They were traitors. They were traitors that murdered loyal American soldiers in the name of white supremacy. What does lost cause tell me?
The exact opposite.
Lost cause tells me that it was states' rights and that the Southerners were heroes and that, yeah, Robert E. Lee was on the losing side, but he was a great hero and one of the best masterminds, military genius. Oh my gosh, we should make statues to the guy, right? He's a traitor that murdered soldiers. He's a traitor. He took up arms against our country and murdered our soldiers. Why are we giving him a statue? It's because of lost cause. You must link lost cause to the Confederacy, okay? It is not enough for you to just say white people think they're better, because that's not lost cause. Is that, Mike, you get that? That's why I shut down your answer, because your answer wasn't specific enough, okay? So with that, what does the Confederacy say about white identity? Why does lost cause show up at this point? Why at 1900? Why didn't lost cause show up in like 1950 or 1870? Why 1900? the timing really matters. When was the Civil War over?
1865.
There you go. All right. So it's been how long since the Civil War? The year's 1900. 35 years, right? Okay. How old were soldiers when they fought?
18.
Yeah, let's say 20 or so, right? So 20 plus 40 equals 60. Okay, the average lifespan is 60. Okay, this matters because grandpa's dying. In 1900, the grandparent generation is dying. And as the grandparent generation is dying, everyone is left going, oh my gosh, oh, grandpa was such a good man. He wasn't a racist bastard that took up arms against the country and murdered American soldiers as a traitor. He wasn't that. He wasn't a brutal slave owning traitor. He was a noble man and we should love him and honor him. Oh, and your family's noble too because of their connection to him. He was a hero to us all. Right? What it does is it gives white people a mythology that makes their racism look legitimate. It makes their racism look like it's a defensible position. Yeah, that's exactly correct, Kira. Kira's comment is 100% exactly correct. Yeah. It gives them a rationalization to justify being racist, essentially. Right? Because everyone can see clearly that racism is wrong. Racism is like a mental disorder, right? It's a mental illness to be racist. And we can all clearly see that. As soon as you see anyone around you, you can clearly see that they're equal, right? You can clearly see that. The problem is that you don't want them to be equal, right? You want them to be inferior to you. And so you have to jump through a bunch of hoops in order to justify that. Lost cause is the hoop. It's the hoop you jump through.
When you're answering this question,
Yeah.
and you're talking about like white identity, you're talking about like lost cause ideology, like could you let's say I cited like the Wilmington massacre and like talked about like like we have like this lost cause ideology, like we have all these like grandparents that are like considered honorable and people are like he was a leader in this like movement for states' rights and stuff. And like he continue being that leader, but now like a black man is the leader of that movement and like he shouldn't be there. Like, so would you like tie it in like that?
Yeah, I think good. I think that those massacres, not just Wilmington, but
Yeah.
Tulsa, Atlanta, all of those massacres are the natural outcropping of the racism, and the lost cause ideology is like the Band-Aid you put over it to justify why the massacre was okay. Right? Because any rational person will look at the massacre and be like, oh my God, what did you do? You just murdered those people, right? And you say, no, I didn't murder those people. I had to preserve the order of things, the natural order of things. It's what I had to do. I had to stand up just like my noble grandfather did. Cool? All right. So you're going to have the test next class period. We won't do a Zoom lesson on Wednesday, probably, because you're going to just take the test, and then you need to work on your IA. Okay? So on Wednesday, what I'll do is I'll probably just post the code for the test or something like that and just let you take the test. Cool?
What's the format for the test? Like, how much time do we have?
So normally you have 50 minutes, 50 minutes. So that's 25 minutes per question. And I will choose 3 of those 5 questions. You will answer one of them and then you'll answer a different one. Cool? Are we all good? Awesome possum. Have a good day. I'll see you guys